Hi, Dragonflies. As I'm recording this, it's the third week in January, so it's right about the time when all those New Year's resolutions fall apart. So this is for everyone who made a resolution to really develop a consistent sketchbook practice this year, and especially for those of you who didn't make that resolution because you've done it so many times in the past and it never worked out, and you've just kind of given up. For example, one of my perpetual resolutions is to get outside and sketch on location more often. It's just really hard to make it happen on a regular basis. It requires time and energy, planning where to go, gathering supplies. Sometimes I just don't have the bandwidth. I was looking back through old journals and I realized that every year, if not every season, I was making the resolution to get outside and sketch on location more, and I would get motivated, make a plan, and somehow it would never seem to stick. I would do it for a while and I would really enjoy it, and then life would get in the way and somehow I would be making the same resolution again the next year. And after a while, you have to wonder, well, what's wrong here? Is this something that I don't really want to do and I just think I want to do or I think I should do? Well, for me in this case, I really do enjoy it, so that wasn't the explanation. So, am I just a lazy, unmotivated person that doesn't have willpower? Well, maybe, but I realized eventually that we talk about establishing a sketchbook habit or a habit of getting into the studio every day or whatever it might be for your creative goals. But these habits are not the kind of habit like remembering to floss your teeth before you get all cozy in bed and don't want to get up to do it. They're complicated tasks that do require time and energy and planning and preparation. So we have to carve out space for them in our lives. And so it's kind of natural that we have to recommit to them again and again and find new ways or adjust the ways that we carve out the time and energy and space for them in our lives as our lives change. So sometimes we get lucky and the plan that we make fits into our life for a longer period of time. And sometimes there's a disruption that's kind of an ongoing change or an ongoing disruption, and we have to make a new plan. So, tip number one is to just recognize that it's perfectly natural that we need to recommit again and again, and also keep making new plans to pursue our creative goals. So that's just big picture advice. Don't freak out or treat it as a failure if you find yourself making the same creative resolutions again and again. That's normal for anything that requires a lot of time and energy and thought and planning to have to recommit to it over and over again. But let's take it down now to specifics, and I want to share with you something that I do to keep my sketchbook practice going or my studio practice going that I think you can adapt to quite a lot of creative goals, and that's paint boring scenes. I know that sounds like terrible advice, but I promise it's fun and relaxing to do, really. So I actually did make time to go out and sketch on location this weekend, but then this happened. I could probably find some things in this scene to combine and make an interesting little sketch, but frankly, it's not inspiring, and that feels like a lot of work for not much benefit. So this would be a day where it would be easy for me to just not work in my sketchbook. This is the kind of situation where I tell myself, okay, just paint a boring little scene. For me, this is usually something pretty small, like the one that I already did in the upper right corner there, but I actually enjoyed that one so much that I'm going to do another one while I explain what I mean by a boring little scene. So for me, most of the work of making a sketch or making a painting is in figuring out what's going to be in this painting and what colors am I going to use and what technique will I use for that part and what's the overall design. All of that is a lot of work. But when I'm painting a boring little scene, I take away all requirements for good design, good technique, any kind of thought. I simply react to what I'm seeing. I paint only the parts that I think are interesting to me in the moment, and I don't worry about whether it makes a recognizable picture to anyone else. It might just be a series of colors that I'm seeing in the scene. I might just play with rendering a single element like the distant shoreline in this little sketch. I might just play around with different ways of suggesting one element of a scene, and these were done on several different days. This is probably 5 or 6 different days worth of work in my sketchbook. So each of these little sketches is its own boring little scene. I like to take a page in my sketchbook and tape off or mark off squares and rectangles all ready for me to put in boring little scenes and then just kind of collect them over time. This is especially handy when I'm traveling and I get overwhelmed with all the new things I'm seeing. Sometimes I just make an abstract pattern like the one in the upper right where I'm pulling some colors from the scene in front of me and ignoring the shapes entirely, making up my own shapes. And again, these 4 little boring scenes were done on different days. No doubt some of you are thinking to yourselves, isn't this just what most artists call making studies? And I guess in terms of what goes down on the page, maybe these do look like studies. And maybe it's just a little psychological trick I play on myself, but making a study sounds like work. It sounds kind of serious and effortful. And making a boring little painting is what I do on a day where I feel like I don't have the energy or the fates are conspiring against me. So what's the point? If I'm not studying anything or making an interesting sketch, isn't this just sort of a waste of time? Well, as they say, your mileage may vary, so you'll have to give it a try and see what you think. But for me, it's not at all a waste of time. Those little bits and pieces often become great little details or backgrounds to add to a painting that just needs a little something. I also find that I observe more closely and remember more of what I'm seeing when I'm just sketching 1 or 2 interesting things that really grab my attention and remove that mental burden of trying to make a picture or think about technique. But the most important value for me is tip number 3 for this video, and that's maintaining momentum is the most important thing if you want to establish a consistent sketchbook practice. But maintaining momentum does not require you to do the same thing in your sketchbook every single day. So for me, painting a boring scene is one of the things that I do to keep my hand in, even if I only have a few minutes or not very much energy. I also sometimes default to simply flipping through the pages of my sketchbook and looking at some of the other boring little paintings I've done in the past, or sifting through the paintings that I'm working on in my studio. If I spend just a minute or 2 doing this on a day when I'm just really too tired and don't have the energy to get into things, it at least keeps my creative practice as part of my day and in my awareness. It allows my subconscious to keep working on the paintings that I'm working on in the background when I don't have time to actually get brush on paper. It generates a lot of enthusiasm for the next time when I can get brush on paper, and it creates a self-image of someone who has a consistent sketchbook practice. By just maintaining the momentum, I'm demonstrating to myself, to my subconscious or unconscious mind, or even my conscious mind, that I actually am the kind of person who can maintain a consistent sketchbook practice. It just doesn't look the same every single day because my days don't look the same every single day. So I hope there's some ideas in here that will help you if you made that resolution this year again. Like me, and I hope that you'll allow yourself to keep recommitting, maintain your momentum, and finally feel like you can establish a consistent sketchbook practice. If these tips aren't enough, there'll be more in future videos, so stay tuned. I'll see you next time. Happy painting.